15 years, the damage that load shedding has brought to this economy has been incalculable.
The death toll from the recent floods in the South African province of KwaZulu-Natal has risen to 49.
After a fairly subdued night, the Knysna fires have begun to grow again.
We begin tonight with the nation already on edge in the coronavirus pandemic as protests turn violent.
London's burning and no one seems able to bring it under control.
You're listening to Off-Grid Survival, South Africa's first prepper podcast.
And we are your hosts, Brett and Ben.
Good evening, Ben. How are you doing?
I'm well, Brett. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to episode 9. We have a special treat for everybody this evening. We have got with us Walther Meyer of Wild Medix sitting in studio. This is a first for us actually having somebody in studio with us.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
New ground is broken.
Welcome, Walther. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks very much, Brett, and thanks for having me here.
Yeah,
And
great.
I feel like such a celebrity being your first in-studio guest, but thank you for having me.
No, that's awesome, man. So I've known Walther, I think we said it's been about 25 years now. We've known each other on and off. We haven't seen each other in a while, but yeah.
A long time, yes. I think some late 90s, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been a few years. Let's put it that way. Okay, so Walther, tell us about yourself.
Oh, okay. That is, it's a long story, I guess. Okay, so I guess what I'm most known for nowadays is for Wild Medix, so running wilderness medical courses and wilderness emergency courses and so on. Been involved in that for a very long time. My background is that I think I, like a lot of people, had my usual runarounds of different jobs and so on. I was actually originally a cabinet maker, so I made furniture for quite a few years. And
I've actually got one of your picture frames hanging up in my bedroom.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's still there after 20 years.
We're going to have to the story of how you get from a cabinet maker into medicine.
Yeah, it's a long story, but yeah, my interest, I guess, was always I was always the weird kid who liked, the survival knife with a compass in the back and the hollow handles. I still like those, and and had all the crazy stuff and the packed first aid kit even in primary school and so on. And yeah, I wanted to be in that field. And originally, actually, when I changed out of cabinet making, which was a family business, I went into mountain guiding and.
Nice.
In that stage, and that was kind of mid 90s in South Africa.
Yeah, I think that's when we first met.
Yeah, exactly. That's when we met, and you were working in that industry or in the outer industry. And so I started off becoming a mountain guide, and a lot of interest in outdoor education. So I kind of always looked at what I think Knowles was doing, in the US as a kind of an inspiration.
Yeah.
So it's sort of outdoor training, adventure leadership, and they also have a wilderness medicine academy type thing. So very similar to what I do. I ended up going to the US in the 90s, and I did a alpine leadership course there. So to enter the world of alpine guiding and so forth. And then I also did an EMT course in the US.
Wow.
And then, when I came back into South Africa at that stage, they were introducing all the national qualifications framework, qualifications for guiding and so forth, including the mountain guide scope that we still have today in South Africa.
Okay.
And then for the highest level there, which was the mountaineering guide qualification, at the time you required a level 5 or what was called the basic ambulance assistant qualification, so which was kind of a South African version of a EMTB course. And so I converted, I did that course, and then got, I guess, sucked into the EMS world via volunteering and got a little addicted to that and spent many years and many nights in that, and carrying on at that stage still with adventure. And then later changing to running adventure guiding courses and so forth, which we still offer today through our other business. And then in 2004, I started Wild Medix. At that stage, I'd been a medic for about 6 or 7 years and had a lot of expeditionary experience and so on. I used to lead groups out of South Africa, around South Africa, but also out into East Africa, into South America, Aconcagua and places like that. So I kind of fulfilled a lot of roles.
So you've done quite a few of the 7 peaks.
Not as few of them. I did some of them several times.
Okay.
But no, my objective was, I guess at the time, to move towards the Himalayas and so forth. That was, I guess, a dream as a youngster. And then realized that, I don't per se necessarily want to do that from a guiding perspective. And I've been an educator always, so I like training. I like running courses. I like sharing skills with people. That's for me me is the if I can run a introductory rock climbing course and then 5 years later the guy is climbing way harder than I could ever hope to climb in my life, for me that's the achievement, rather than having it the other way around. It's and I had a lot of that. I've had a lot of guys who started with us who then end up being really good guides or very good climbers or whatever. And the same when I applied to I think the first aid side of things. I want people to be the best at it and to be really capable and absolutely be able to look after themselves and their loved ones and members of the public, because ultimately that's your community, right? So I think with first aid, for me it's always been the pebble in the pond effect. When you drop the pebble in and those rings go out, and you might be whatever, a truck driver somewhere, and you're, no offense to truck drivers, I was one, but you understand, you end up resuscitating some guy next to the road and or doing CPR on some guy who's a whatever, who cures cancer one day or something. You know what I mean? It's sort of the pebble in the pond effect.
I did obviously my first aid courses as a kid and when I was in Scouts and that sort of thing. And then when I became later on in life a sales rep and I was out on the road, the number of accidents I actually came across, and I was able to put that first aid training into practice, whether it was just putting somebody in the recovery position or bandaging a head wound. Knowing how to handle a situation is really important. And I think as people in the preparedness field, having a knowledge of first aid and emergency responder services and how we can look after ourselves and our families is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as in a critical emergency, you're it. And I think that's what people often think, that, I live in a fantastic system and I live somewhere where I can make a call and there'll be an ambulance in, the statistics say, in 22 minutes or something. All that sort of nonsense. But 22 minutes will end up being the longest 22 minutes of your life. Yeah. And, in a critical emergency, you often don't have 22 minutes. You might have 22 seconds. Yeah. And your chances of, I always say to people, if your chances of having a medic there in time would be, best place to get shot would be at something like an engine with a Seattle Coffee Company, because there are always paramedics there. But, you will. Other than that, what is your chance of getting a medic there in moments? It's like they say, they say the same thing about police officers. Is when you need one, if you need a paramedic, you need a paramedic. Well, if you need a paramedic in seconds, they're only minutes away. So. Yeah.
Thank you. No, cool. And then, you've done a lot of mountain guiding. You've obviously done the medic side. What else have you ever been involved in?
I've done a lot of different things. I get bored quite easily, and I always like to learn as well. I'm a forever student. If I can go on a course with somebody else tomorrow, then I'll go on a course with that person. Yeah. You can always learn something. So I've also done work alongside some security companies in the security industry. I've done a lot of remote area deployed type work from a medic perspective. So being a medic in various sort of environments. I've done firearms instructor training, qualified as that, and as I said, I just keep going. For all the weirdest and wonderful things I can find, I keep doing.
Yeah, I envy you sometimes. I promise you, I'd love to be doing some of the stuff you guys get a chance to do. I'm stuck in retail.
You did get to be stuck in a snowstorm with me once, Brent.
I worked out the other day. That was, I'm pretty sure it was 1999. Yes. And it was the Matroosburg, and it got down to -18.
Well, outside, I got on my watch at about 3 in the morning. It measured -54, which is Arctic, So
that was. I have never been that cold in my life, and I hope to never be that cold ever again. But it definitely. We had a bit of a cold snap here on the garden route this week, where I actually had ice on my car in the morning.
Yes.
And I was like, nah. Can I go back inside,
getting
please?
Some PTSD to our mountain guiding course up in Matroosburg.
No, that was. I remember that weekend vividly. I don't think I'll ever forget it. It was definitely a life-changing experience for me.
Talking about that, your joint experience up a mountain in a snowstorm. When coming back to a prep mindset, most people think gear's going to solve all problems. Another line of thought is planning and knowledge. That'll solve all problems. In that type of scenario where you knew it was going to get cold, but you didn't quite estimate that level of cold, how much of your survival was knowing how to survive and how much of it was prep in gear?
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you think about those conditions, especially in the South African context, very few people ever actually face those or go out in those conditions. Right? I think it's one of the reasons we have also a lot of mountain call-outs and accidents and things, is because, if it's bad weather today, then I just postpone until tomorrow, and then because tomorrow's a nice day, and then so I can hike for 20 or 50 years as a recreational hiker and never actually face a storm or a wet day or something like that. I can avoid it if I really want to, especially from a day hiking context. If you only hiked on nice sunshine days, if you lived, say, in Scotland, you would hike once a year or something. So you know what I mean. So you inevitably, if you're a hiker in that sort of environment, you get a lot more experience of those sort of conditions. So I think of the event that Brett and I were in that snowstorm. It was an unusually heavy snowstorm, I think.
I think they said it was the worst in 50 years.
50 years or something like that. Yeah, it was fun to see it in the newspapers 3 days later and say, well, we went camping in that. But anyway, so I think if you think about equipment versus skill, if you look at something like pitching a mountain tent, so we had decent tents there, but you can have the best quality mountain tent in that type of snowstorm if you don't know that I'm supposed to dig it out every half an hour, 45 minutes. If I need to keep the snow off the roof, I need to build a snow wall to keep the wind from pushing it over. And it's very easy to climb in the thing and think I'm just going to sit this out, but you're working the whole night. You're not sleeping. You're going for it. It's survival. And if you don't have that knowledge, you don't want to learn it when that tent collapses on you with 1.5 meters of snow on top of it, right? Yeah. So the same with cooking in that sort of conditions is incredibly difficult because a lot of your normal stoves and so on don't work when it's that cold, or they work incredibly poorly. Yeah. So knowing little sneaky tricks to get that stove to function, especially at a reasonable high altitude. So that was over 2,000 meters. And although, look, people think of high altitude as, it must be 8,000 meters. That's also nonsense. I mean, high altitude, it really starts from about 2,000 meters up, and you have increasing problems, both on sort of a medical side, but also on the equipment side at that stage that you need to know. And then I think what happened there is we spent the first probably 50 odd hours going through the storm because it started snowing in the afternoon. Went through the night, I think, did we go second night in the tent?
No, only one night in the tent.
And then late afternoon, we decided to head down to the huts. So there are some huts there in that mountain. And what is interesting is from where we were camped down to those huts in nice conditions, it would take you less than half an hour to walk down there. It took us 4 hours to fight through the snow. We were up to our necks in the snow. Yep. At the stage, we had to basically lie on our backpacks and crawl down the mountain and so on, just so that you don't sink into the snow. Because
it was interesting.
If you stand up, it goes down. So interesting one there for me was navigation, for instance. Once again, that although I knew exactly where I was because I work in that mountain range often, so I spot on know where I am, which makes it easier. In that condition, you actually suddenly don't know where you are.
All your landmarks
so
are snowed in.
All the landmarks are gone. Everything changes. So navigation there became interesting. And for that 4 hours, I had to keep on that bearing that I had, because you can work out your bearing if you know where you are. Right? So, and I can work out my bearing to the hut where I need to go. And I could follow that. But to keep that straight for 4 hours in that storm was challenging. Even with, it's my life is teaching that stuff. So I have a lot of experience of it. So for somebody who occasionally uses a compass or who buys a compass and hangs it around their neck and now think they can navigate, that's, which is a very common situation in our country as well, is that, that piece of equipment on its own doesn't really help you. You need the knowledge that goes with it, and you need to back it up with some experience. And the only way to get experience is to have some epics, right? So you got to go out and do some stuff.
You gain experience by having experiences.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
by being at the point where the pawpaw and the blade meet.
And then you feel exactly. Yeah. So that was, we got down to the point where the hut was, and we were very, very tired at that stage. And I remember sitting there, and I'm saying to myself, I've paced this of we must be very close to the hut, and suddenly there was a little opening in the weather, and we were literally 20 meters from the hut, but you couldn't see the hut because of the whiteout conditions. Until you live something like that, people don't think it can happen. And then, of course, in looking at a wilderness situation, you cannot always have all the gear. It's just impossible. You can't have everything that you really want with you, because you have to carry it, and you have to fit it in your backpack, and you have to be reasonable about what you're carrying. And
that comes back to prepping again. Is that with regard to things like bug out bags? You, as much as we want all the gadgets and all the gear, it's just not practical. You've got to know your gear, you've got to practice with your gear, and you've got to have gear that works. But you can't be the guy carrying the 100-kilogram backpack. You want to be the guy carrying the 20-kilogram backpack at max, and yeah, all situation dependent, obviously. But yeah,
well, with a 100-kilo backpack, you would have sunk in the snow and you'd still be there.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, we had some pretty heavy packs, but yeah, still you can only have that limited equipment, and it's also good to know how to improvise things, how to make things do different things when what they're intended for, or how to make things from the land or whatever, or I don't know, make things from your dead friend's bones.
I seem to remember an ice axe being used really well as a key.
Yes. You know, if the guys want to lock their huts, they're going to get it open in an emergency. So,
and that was a genuine emergency.
Yes.
You actually need to.
Not to take too long on a side quest, but what technique did you use to keep your bearing? Did you have one person in front walking a line and then do it like that, or?
Yeah, so look, in that low visibility, there are limited things that you can do, because you can normally walk from landmark to landmark, right?
Yes.
So you pick a landmark on your bearing, you walk to it. In that case, you kind of use the person in front of the person behind you technique. So what I did is, the girl who was behind me, I put her where I wanted her behind me. I shot the bearing from there, and then I would move until I can't see her anymore. Well, not completely, you know, as you start losing visibility of her. Then I had everybody roped together, so then I would just pull on the rope and she would know, and then she comes in my tracks. So basically I use her as a back bearing, so she becomes a back bearing marker, and that's how I went through it. You could also use the person in front technique, of course, and put a person out front and do the bearing on them, but in those conditions it wasn't really feasible, because I had to keep the people tied together for safety, and also I think aside from me, there were limited people there with snow experience and so on. So
I think you were the only person at that stage that
probably
had any snow
the only person. And listen, plodding through that snow as well it's exceptionally tiring work. So fortunately at the time, because it was my full-time job, I was pretty fit and strong, so I could plod through that snow the whole time.
So you were making
break road, but because the last thing you want is somebody getting completely exhausted and collapsing at that stage. You know, so yeah, that's kind of how we went down. Basically, you've got to work with what you have.
So we think of, you know, snowstorm like that, freezing cold. But how much are you actually sweating working through the snow like that?
You keep pretty warm.
Which is your biggest danger? Because I've heard of a lot of the guys in America talk about, when you're working hard like that, you should be actually stripping clothing off of you so that you're not sweating yourself wet.
Yeah,
because as soon as you stop, you freeze.
Correct. Yeah. So you use a layering system for dressing, and it's traditionally the recommended thing for mountaineering, right? You don't want one thick jacket. You want 3 or 4 layers that you can layer up to form a thick jacket. And you may go from, say, just having a base layer on, so you're having your underwear on and then your shell on top of it directly on you, you know, and then take the middle layers out, for instance.
Yes.
Although while we were going down the mountain there, it was still incredibly cold at that stage, because we were still in the storm. It wasn't like the storm had subsided. We were in the actual eye of the storm, essentially, going down the mountain. So it remains freezing cold. You do start sweating eventually, but that also depends on what outer shell you have on. You see, if you use a cheaper outer shell that's say a rubberized rain suit, like most people know, like what you can buy from the corporatie, you know, the rain trousers with like the security guard style rain suit. Although that thing will keep the rain out and will keep the wind out, it will also keep your moisture in, so you will get very, very wet and sweaty from it. It's still better than nothing. If I had a choice between that and nothing, I would certainly rather wear that rubberized rain suit, because you'll die otherwise. But if you have something like a breathable waterproof material, something like Gore-Tex or Event or whatever, those materials actually function best when it's hot on the inside and cold on the outside. So in normal South African conditions, when it's rainy and say still kind of warm, and they actually don't function that well, you still get sweaty. But when it's a situation like that, when it's really cold on the outside and it's warm against your body, that's when they really optimally work.
So it's literally wicking the water off your body and out through the membrane.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really what they're designed for. So they work in those conditions. So it wasn't too bad, but that hard work keeps you going. But look, the moment you stop, if you sit down, anything like that, you get cold.
Yeah, cool, man. So like in a situation like that, I'm sure there's different first aid issues that could arise, and training is, as we've discussed already, is really important. What are some interesting first aid scenarios that, in your experience in the field and as a trainer, things that you've come across that might help us?
You mean like actual incidents?
Yeah, actual
and
incidents.
case studies and so on. Yeah, so look, that sort of thing varies greatly. Look, if you look at a perspective, obviously from ambulance road work, you see just all kinds of things, you know, and especially over a long career, you can see all the weirdest things, sometimes things that you can't even think, you know, the weirdest horror writer would come up with in a book. And you can also see the funny things, you know, some very, very strange things. And then looking at wilderness issues and so on, that can obviously vary greatly. You can, say, work on an expedition or something, and you can work an entire expedition and treat very little that is serious, you know. You can, whatever, blisters or something like that, you know, it's all these little things. I think also context matters, right? So something that at home and within a functioning system or something may be a very easy thing to look after. In a wilderness situation, it may change it completely. So you know, if you take blisters once again, for instance, you know, if you have a 15 or a 20-day trip and guy gets blisters on day 1 and he wears dirty socks, and by day 4 or 5 he's got infection, and you know, suddenly it changes that game completely. People like to, when we talk about first aid, always think of his, you know, oh, it must be a big gunshot and I must be stopping the bleed with a tourniquet and all of that. But there's so much more to medicine than that. That is, of course, it is important skills to have, but yeah, it can be little things that become big things because of a situation. If you think in different countries, for instance, I worked in Sudan, and there I had a patient with dysentery, for instance, which is a very interesting thing to deal with. In a sense, it's, you know, it's what you get when you touch the sewage and you get the sewage in your mouth and so on. And and I hope nobody's eating listening to this, but yeah. You know, and that, you know, it's not as traumatic as like an immediate thing like a motor vehicle accident or whatever, but
it can be
it's actually a hell of a challenging to deal with limited resources, you know. But in hospital, in a functioning system, it's something that's commonly treated and fairly easily taken care of. But if you're out in the wild, that becomes an issue. Or if you're out in a country where the system's destroyed, it's like
if we look at it from a preparedness point of view, as preppers who have basic or fairly advanced maybe first aid kits. I know in my first aid kit, I've got nothing except for maybe a packet of rehydrate. So yeah, how, like something like you said, like dysentery, or even more serious if you get into diseases like cholera and stuff like that, waterborne diseases.
Yes.
As preppers, is there anything you can recommend?
Sure. Yeah, that's once again, it's a very wide open question, right? Because there are so many things. So it depends what is it that you're preparing for, you know. Exactly. If you're preparing for a hike, you know, where everything else is normal. I'm going on a hike for a couple of days with my mates, and then you prepare just for that, and you prepare that if there is an emergency, I am bringing that person back out into a functioning system, and maybe there is backup service available for me. Okay, and then depending on where you go hiking, you find out what is my backup service, how do I contact my backup service, right? I can't send a postal pigeon, so I need to some way or form activate the EMS, and then I've got to keep the guy alive, you know, because a lot of people they rely on things like, oh, the helicopter will be here. You know, helicopter, it's like Uber, it's the helicopter will just take me off the mountain. But in some countries, there is no helicopter. Right? And so it depends where you are. And then also keep in mind the helicopter only arrives if you can actually call the damn thing. So if you have no ways of... well, okay, it depends. In South Africa, the government takes care of that. Right? So you're not getting charged for that. I'm not talking about utilizing a private service, right? I'm talking about utilizing the government services. If they do a mountain rescue, to the best of my knowledge, they don't charge you for it. So that shouldn't be so much the concern. But the concern is, how do I contact the people, for instance? So I need to plan for that, and then what is my window in which I have to take care of this person, and that changes with your level of training and your level of preparing. If you take the wilderness medicine, for instance, what we teach a lot, wilderness medicine is where you have limited resources, and getting help is difficult, evacuation is difficult, but you are coming back to a functioning system. You can then go a little bit further and you can say, well, I'm preparing for a survival medicine situation. And survival medicine, there is no functioning system for whatever reason. So maybe you have whatever massive natural disaster or something, you have an earthquake, you have a tsunami, something like that. What was that film with Ewan McGregor about the tsunami in Thailand? You know, I forgot what the film's called, but there's a very good film. It's kind of a documentary.
There was the Christmas tsunami.
And then they're looking for their children, and you see the hospitals and they're destroyed, and it's actually a good thing to see to give you an idea of what would realistically happen in a situation like that. So the system's gone. Now you're in a survival medicine situation, right? And then things change. What am I preparing for now is very different than what I'm preparing for if I'm hiking or otter trail.
Yeah, and I think that sort of situation is what's more likely to happen. Okay, we don't have the natural disasters that somewhere like the US has. We don't have earthquake swarms, and we don't have Tornado Alley and that sort of thing. Although I don't know what's going on in KZN lately, but they've had a couple of tornadoes up there. But we don't have that level of destruction where entire towns get taken out by a tornado.
You should read up about the Tolbach earthquake. And
that was a long time ago.
So just look, we are.
Happen, yeah.
You are correct that, for instance, we live on a very stable piece of earth, right? So we're fortunate like that. It doesn't mean it can't happen. And the other thing about it, what is interesting is, of course, is if it now should happen, I can tell you that almost no one's prepared for it, because it's not something that happens every season like in the US. You know, if you live in a place where you know there's a tornado every season, then you're prepared for it, and your neighbors are prepared for it. Remember, I think for you as a prepper, one of your big dangers is not you, it's your other people who are not prepared, right? Because they'll eat your stuff or eat you if a disaster happens. So it is, it changes the whole thing. So if your whole community is prepared for an earthquake, it's a hell of a lot better than just you being prepared for an earthquake.
Yeah, I think from a South African context, that natural disasters are, as we keep coming back to, and Ben can attest to, something like the Knysna fires.
Yes.
That took down infrastructure for what was about 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, it was a while before we got back up, power up and water up.
So, and as you're saying now, you're in survival mode.
Yes.
Yes, government is trying to help, but we can't rely on government to do stuff like that. We need to rely on ourselves.
Sorry, but even that is not survival mode, because you can always leave and find a functioning system.
Yes.
We have very little natural disasters compared to the rest of the world, but we have
other issues.
A government. Okay, and we can go into a non-functioning system just staying at home. We don't have to be in the wild.
Yeah,
and that's what, as South Africans, we live with, that we have infrastructure that might collapse.
Yeah,
and
load shedding's proved that. So
so it is one of those things that it is not as far-fetched. It's not like 28 days later or zombie apocalypse or something like that. It is what we live with, and it's more real when we hit stage 6 load shedding.
Yes. Look, I think if you look at disasters that can hit at wide areas of the country, probably the most risky one would be a total grid shutdown, like where the electricity system goes out completely for whatever reason, whether that is terrorism or planned, or whether it's incompetence or whatever, because that's not going to go out. If it's out, right? It's not going to be back up in 6 hours time. I'm not talking about load shedding or whatever misnomer we use for it now, but it's sort of, if it's a total countrywide collapse, you're going to have chaos, and you're going to have medical issues very soon, because remember that, it's water delivery, it's sewage systems, it's everything is gone within hours after that. And to get that going, so that type of disaster could be a huge issue. And then, of course, your medical preparation for that is very different once again, for your everyday system functioning preparations.
About 6 months ago, in the Karoo region on the other side of the mountain here, they had quite a hectic storm, and it knocked down 7 pylons. Just 7. And towns from Prince Albert to Ladysmith were without electricity for 2.5 weeks. Okay. And the first thing that went down that people noticed was there was no water.
Yes.
Then the toilets stopped flushing.
Yes.
And then the toilets started backing up.
Yes.
And it's a chain reaction.
Yes.
And as soon as that chain reaction starts, emergency services get stretched to breaking point. They can only do so much themselves, and they've got their own families.
Exactly. I think that is what people forget as well. In a true SHTF style emergency, eventually your first responders and everybody goes home as well, because they also have people to look after.
And also, simple things like jipper guts start becoming life-threatening because all of the stuff that you can normally deal with it easily is gone away.
Yeah.
And I heard somebody talking one time about if South Africa went down, the grid shut down. Say for argument's sake, we had a solar flare, all the infrastructure was still there, the grid went out of balance, and they had to shut it down and restart. It's like a month or something, because they have to start one generator, then start the next one, sync it up, and then connect it up, then sync the next one.
Keep in mind that's if things go perfectly, right? Think about now you need spare parts, you need to replace, transformers, you need to do that. Think about what happens to the power cables when,
there's no power running through.
When some people find out it's now very easy to take them down, and then you have a much bigger problem, which will become I think it'll become a giant issue very quickly, and it will go beyond repair very, very quickly. The idea of just switching it back on, I think that is...
People don't understand because they think of switching a light switch, it's on and it's off. But these big generators, they take ages to sync up and go back online. And we've got how many? I think the last time I saw it, we've got like 7 dam systems and whatever else. And all of these things have to be shut down and then restarted and resynced.
Yes.
And it takes long.
It's massive.
Well, if I remember correctly, with Kuberg, because they obviously turn generators off to do maintenance, it takes a month to get one generator because they started at 10% and then they slowly build it up to 100%. That's just one power station.
And that's planned, man.
And that's planned. That's not a bolt dropping in the turbine.
Us in the garden route is not getting that electricity.
No.
Yeah, I know we're kind of going on a bit of a tangent here, but I think South Africa's biggest problem when it comes to electricity is that we're tied to a single grid. Whereas in countries like the US, they've got 3 or 4 grids, I think. So you've got East Coast, West Coast, and then you've got Texas. And then you've got also Central.
But you also got a lot of energy providers. Yeah, we have one energy provider. If they go wobbly, that's it.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, tangent over. Okay, now that let's get off that tangent of Eskom and let's get back to first aid, which is your primary expertise. In front of you, we've got a Take-A-Lot special first aid kit that I paid about, I think it was 800 Rand for.
Yeah, 800.
Yeah, that's a fairly comprehensive. He says, "What's wrong with it?" I go, "It's fairly comprehensive." So yeah, I just from your point of view as a professional, for the average person, what do you think is the minimum that somebody needs in a first aid kit?
Sure. Yeah, I would say there. Look, keep in mind that most of those things it's utterly useless if you don't have a knowledge of what to do with them, and also, if you can rule out some of the myths that people believe in about certain things like, I can stop bleeding by putting salt in it, or I can plug a gunshot with a tampon, or whatever other nonsense.
I had a heated debate about that one on Facebook recently.
Oh my goodness. Hopefully you were on the side of not sticking a tampon.
I was. And then I got taken down by a guy in the States that said he was a medic and he teaches all his students that that's perfectly fine to do.
Oh my goodness.
I heard somebody say that while it could work, the amount of fibers and stuff left in the wound, they have to now try and clear out.
Yeah, that's also just it's just extending on the nonsense. It's look, basically, if you take something like that, it doesn't do what people think it does. It's funny when you run courses. So one of our most popular courses is this thing called Stop the Bleed. It's a short course, doesn't have a lot of theatrics or anything. It's solid knowledge and how to use things like a tourniquet, how to wound pack. It's people are quite scared of that. They don't understand you've got to get the stuff inside sometimes, rather than on the outside of a patient. Then it does chest seals, so for penetrating chest injuries and so on. That's basically what you cover in the course. It's a morning workshop, and that question comes up a lot with the tampons and the gunshots. It's a very common myth everywhere, but South Africa is very, for some other reason, it's a big thing here that people believe. It's generally connected to, whatever, my cousin in Benoni shagged a guy who was a recce or knew a guy who was a recce, and he told her, it's that sort of nonsense. But and he told her that the recces carry tampons for gunshots. It's only men who ever ask this question, really. I've never had a woman on a course ask this question because they all know what the tampon does. The men don't seem to understand that the thing doesn't expand like Hilti expanding foam when you put it in. And I mean, if you think about it in its original application, if you used it and then 2 hours later you had to pull it out with a Hilux, would you actually use it? It wouldn't sell because it doesn't really do that. Okay, so the thing doesn't expand. It's basically a cotton wool ball that's rolled up and it becomes a soft cotton wool ball when it's in the blood. And the purpose is not controlling bleeding. It is hygiene, right? It's absorption. It's to carry on with your life without having issues. And it has zero to do with bleeding control. In once again, it's in its original application. You're not really trying to stop that bleeding because that would be stupid because it's supposed to happen.
Yes.
So if you, it doesn't work like that. You can, if you take a Z-fold compression gauze, for instance, and you open it up and you hold that up next to a tampon and you cut the tampon open even and look what's inside, and you compare those two things, that's immediately tells you it's not going to do the job, right? It's the one thing and the other thing is two totally different things. So yeah, it's myths like that becomes an issue with first aid kits as well, because when people want to pack tampons in a first aid kit, the only reason to have tampons in a first aid kit is so that you have spare tampons if there's a lady who needs one.
Yes.
It's there's no other real reason to have it in a first aid kit. Is it good to have in a first aid kit? Yes. If it's good to have an expedition first aid kit, sure, you can have it, but it's for that purpose. It's not. It's spares. Okay. It's
So it's just a question.
Yeah.
If tampons don't work, what about Rambo and his gunpowder in the wound? Okay, does that work?
Yeah. So look,
Cauterizing the wound.
Cauterizing the wound. It's one of those things which in theory. You could, but it depends to the extent of the injury. It's once again, it's the same thing with, the people who claim, oh, well, I put my finger in the table salt in my kitchen when I cut my finger and then it stops the bleeding, or I put some flour on it and it stops the bleeding. And maybe in that situation, it's a little cut on your finger and you put some flour on it and it will create a bit of a paste there and it might control that little bit of bleeding. Now, the people translate that to, if it's a serious bleed, I'm going to pour flour into my friend's wound and then that is going to control this bleed. You see, it's completely out of context and it's nonsense, because also the one in the kitchen, you could just take some kitchen paper and put some pressure on it and it will stop that bleeding.
Just your other finger.
Or your other finger, yes, exactly. And you can save flour for baking. Right? So it's most of those things. It's utter nonsense. Right? It's just and context matters. Right? It's the context. So look for your first aid kit. The ones that you generally buy pre-packed. This one that you have here. There's nothing wrong with it per se. It's a what is typically called a regulation first aid kit in South Africa. You get two types or two sizes with it's kind of a Department of Labor thing, and it's prescribed for factories and shops and that sort of thing. It's very, very, very elementary. It's got basic bandages and it's got a couple of hygiene things in it. It's got some wound care stuff in it. It's got splints in it, which can range from quite good ones to absolute utter nonsense and so on. But anyway, it depends on the kit. So it's a good start. There's nothing wrong with that stuff, but it's not going to help you in a super serious traumatic emergency. Some of it might help you if you know what to do with it. If you know how to pack a wound, you can pack it with a cheap gauze roll. You don't need a 1,000 rand gauze roll. But once again, your situation depends whether that thing is going to suffice or not. So it's a good foundation to start with.
Well, just to give you an idea, I bought this because I like the size of it and it's got a lot of stuff in it and I know how to use, I'd say, pretty much everything in there. I opened it up when it arrived and there was no burn shield in it.
Yes.
So the first thing I went and did, I went and bought some burn shield, added burn shield. The disinfectant liquid in it was some no-name brand that I'd never seen before. I tossed that and I went and got Dettol, put that in. So yeah, having the knowledge to know what can be added to make a kit better. And something that people always laugh at me that meant to be in there, but it's actually lying behind me, I put in as well, is a high-vis vest.
Yes.
So we think as preppers, we don't want to be seen, but as a first aider or somebody that comes on scene,
on a road.
And I want that high-vis vest. Yes. I don't want a truck hitting me.
No, absolutely. It's a hell of a good tool to have.
If you're waiting for rescue, you want to be seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
so that actually needs to go back in the first aid kit.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So look, with your kits, you basically get obviously different ones for different applications. So a very popular thing at the moment is this idea of a IFAC, or individual first aid kit, which comes out of a kind of a tactical medicine field. The idea with that is it's actually equipment that you carry for yourself and that will get used on you. The idea is not that you really dish it out to other people.
Yeah.
Your bigger medical kits like this thing that you've got here, that obviously has stuff for more people in it. So the IFAC is kind of a foundation for immediate trauma care, for yourself. Obviously, you can use it on other people. There's no rule. But the intention originally was in say a team context that every team member would have the same IFAC and the medic of a team would have a big medic bag plus also an IFAC, because of course if a medic gets injured, he would also work out of his IFAC. And if a medic then has to work on you, he would start in your IFAC, work from your IFAC on you.
Okay.
Once your IFAC's empty, or if he needs stuff that's not in your IFAC, he would open his medic bag, because it's quick to get into that IFAC situation. So generally that would be something like 2 tourniquets, a set of chest seals, 2 chest seals, packing gauze, pair of scissors, marker pen, a couple of bandages that you can use. Look for something like that. Higher quality bandages would be great. Once again, interesting thing there is you can buy a 100 Rand bandage and you can buy a 10 Rand bandage. You can achieve almost the same thing with it if you have the right technique of bandaging, right, if you understand it. But anyway, you would pack some bandages in it, and then you can expand it a little bit more in terms of skill. So it's one of those things at the moment where people always want to buy the cool toy, so they want to have chest decompression needles and all these sort of things in it, which is great if you know how to use them. And
I see that a lot.
Understand them,
I keep seeing online guys advertising skin staplers. I'm like, that's something that gets used in a hospital or by a trained medic, not by a first aider.
Yeah.
And you don't need a stapler in your first aid kit. If you've done advanced stuff, then maybe you can think about something like that.
Yeah, I think, look, some of those tools, if you look at bleeding control, for instance, people battle to differentiate between wound care and bleeding control sometimes, right? So a skin stapler isn't really bleeding control, it's wound care. If you think about it, the bleeding is under control. I've cleaned the wound thoroughly, it's sterile, I'm now closing it, it's in place of sutures. It's not something that I sit there and staple myself while I have my pistol in my other hand fighting the bad guy, right? And I'm stapling with my right hand and shooting with my left hand, or whatever people come up with. I've also I've heard guys say that I'm going to put my 2 skin staplers in my ballistic vest, for instance, and you're like, what? Okay, if you run out of ammo, you can shoot staples at the purpose assailant, but it's wound closure and bleeding control. It's 2 different things. The same with carrying sutures, for instance. If it's a skill that you use only once, everything is entirely under control, I've thoroughly cleaned the wound, everything is out of there, now I will suture it, okay? If you think of I can suture, I'm allowed to suture according to my qualification, whatever, I can carry the stuff for it, I know how to do it. Would I field suture things? Typically no. I would use bleeding control techniques, bandaging, dressing, evacuate the person. If it's longer term care, I would start using improvised techniques such as or steri-strips, or there are some different techniques that you can use with, say, duct tape and paracord to close a wound without actually having to rely on that, and it's non-invasive. And at least then at the hospital they can, if they need to open it and whatever, they can easily do it.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Because now Mr. Average First Aider comes along with my stapler. Guy's got a wound on his arm, and I staple it shut and then bandage it up. He gets to hospital. They've now got to remove those staples before they can treat him properly.
Not to mention that you're probably get a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think, look, it's those things they've got their place, but it's out of context for most first aiders to have it, and out of skill level as well. So always start with, look, what am I planning for? What am I preparing for? Is this my home kit? Is it my car kit? Is it my IFAC? Is it my hiking kit? If it's an outdoor kit, we work a lot with adventure guides and so on, of course. So a hiking guide can carry different things or should carry different things than, say, an overland guide might carry, because the overland guide has got the capacity, because he can carry a big paramedic-sized jump bag in his vehicle, and he can have a small kit for if I step out of a vehicle. Whereas if you're a hiking guide, you're very, very limited. You've got, you really, really need to know what you're doing, and you need to improvise with, or be able to improvise with other equipment, for instance. So and then how many people am I catering for, and for how long, and what is my risk assessment? What is my likely things that I face? And once again, you can start with a pre-purchased kit and then build up like you suggested, and improve with what is in there.
My kit, I bought sutures and a stapler and a staple remover years ago, and most of the stuff's in my home bulk bag, or bulk box. And my thought process wasn't like, I'd love to know how to suture and stuff, but it was more like, if stuff goes pear-shaped, I have the stuff and I'm likely to be able to find a doctor. And if I have the guy with the expertise and I have the tools and I put the 2 together,
Yes.
then it's a benefit.
Exactly. So you're correct. So from a prepping perspective, different to your normal first aid is you might keep equipment which is outside your skill level for that in stock, so to speak. So rather than, or like what I often do with overland guides, I advise them to carry shops and so on. So they'll carry IV sets, they'll carry different needles, different catheters, all these sort of things. And the purpose is not for them to use it, it's for them to hand to a doctor or to a nurse and say, okay, please don't use the stuff that's lying there in your clinic that hasn't been cleaned in 15 years and rather use my stuff. Because if you're in the middle of nowhere with your clients who are paying a lot of money to be there, you want to have that sort of stuff. So correct, yes, absolutely. So from a prepping perspective, keeping staplers and sutures and all that stuff is always good, because also, once again, think about that tsunami. After that's gone through the hospital, the doctor might be alive, but he doesn't have sutures. So you rock up with a box of sutures and you're a big hero, so it is... so that's a different thing. Okay, yes. So being prepared compared to what you carry with you on a daily basis, different thing. Absolutely.
These type of kits like this one, the red one from Takelot, and I bought some from Discam, like a big kit that is 200 and something rand. So there's no part of me that thinks that anything's in that has got quality. But the bag, if you try and buy this cheapy bag loose, you're paying a lot of money for it.
Yep.
So you go, okay, well, I'm going to buy a below par medical kit, but I get a bag. It's nice and red.
Yes.
And there's a lot of stuff in here I can use, even if the first thing I normally do is when I open a kit, I toss out the gloves because they're normally they're vinyl stuff. So you buy yourself nitrile gloves or whatever you like to use, and you pack in like 4 times more than you think you're going to need. And like the normal small packs, like I bought one at K-Way the one time. I happened to be at an accident, not part of it, but there were 3 of us supplying a first aid kit to the off-duty nurse that was attending to the guy that got driven over. We went through every bit of bandaging, trying to stop a bleed.
Yeah.
And she went through every pair of gloves, and she still had blood on her hands because the gloves just kept dripping. And so that's when I saw is like, the first thing I do is add bandages and I add gloves to my packs. And then obviously, I mean, if you're using it for hiking, then you put your, what's the stuff called, antihistamine stuff.
Yes.
And obviously something to purify your water, like sterilize your water.
Yes.
But that's, normal use, say, if you're going to go hiking and stuff, just in case,
Absolutely, Yeah, no, for sure. Look, your comment on the bag, it is interesting. It is one of my pet peeves in South Africa has always been the difficulty to find a decent bag, especially a first aid bag on its own, with nothing in it. You always get a bunch of stuff inside. Also, a lot of the bags that are supplied like this, they do look nice, but sometimes the quality is dubious and the zips start falling apart and so forth, especially with a bit of heavy use. So, we sell bags. For instance, we've got Wild Medix bags, which we provide, which you can buy loose. I'm quite big on the, what are those shops, the Build-A-Bear shops where you can go build yourself a little fireman teddy bear or something. So we do that with first aid kits at the shop, and you can come and start with a bag, and then you start putting in what you need, and you can obviously buy as you can afford it and so forth. And it's quite popular where people come and sit, they can actually talk to you and sit and say, listen, what must I pack in my bag? Consult with me on me, not this generic idea of I'm taking this thing off a shelf in a pharmacy and I just live with what's in there. But yes, the pouch itself is an issue, and then you can, of course, you can get the sort of all the, how would you put it, the more tactical brands. So you can go buy a 511 first aid kit, or you can buy Helicon Tex makes a really, really nice ones where it's available locally. But you pay a premium for those things. So if you start there, you start out already on a more expensive side. Wilderness side, if you want some really nice stuff, you can import yourself a Conterra bag or something from the US. But it's a whole different ball game to these things. But it's good. Get a bag and start building it. It doesn't have to be a medical bag. Look, it's nice if it is a medical looking bag, because it's a way of identifying yourself as well. One of the questions people always ask is, what if the person refuses help? And, a person is allowed to refuse help. They're allowed to say to you, no, don't touch me. And, I don't want you to render first aid to me. Having a bag that looks like a first aid kit is disarming. When you arrive and you say to people, listen, I'm a first aider. See my bag, first aid bag. You can open it and show them, look, there's some bandages in here. I would like to bandage your leg to help you. It's not going to cost you anything. And then they become a little bit more trusting of you. You just pitch up there and, I'm here to help you. And they,
Okay.
especially the South African thought pattern is that, oh no, you're here to steal my mag wheels, or you're here to rob my wallet, So it's a nice identifiable thing to have something that looks like an actual medical kit, rather than say something that looks like a military bag or whatever.
So you mentioned that you have a shop.
Yes.
Tell us more.
So we have it's a small shop. It's at our training center. So we are partners with a company called not how would I say it? We're friendly partners, right? With a company called CHS Guns, which is a long established gun shop in Cape Town, and we share premises with them in Somerset West Strand area. So we've just moved to nice new premises. We used to be in a dungeon, and we've just moved out of a dungeon, and we're now in a place with daylight, and we have a training venue there. We have the gun shop, and we have an outdoor and medical shop there. So we also do other sort of outdoor products, your normal hiking, more upmarket stuff. So we do, your sort of Osprey and Black Diamond and all that sort of thing. Okay. So we do some of that, but then we also have our own range of imported survival stuff, which is, it's more so that I can take some of it home and play with it. But so we import stuff, knives and tools and things which you generally don't find in other places. And then, of course, for medical gear. So we've got like all first aiders and first responders, and so it's kind of like a candy store. And we actually put the stuff in candy jars so that it looks like a candy store. So you can come in and buy all the different, different tourniquets. You guys must come in, but then you're going to have to make a video, not just a sound podcast. But
it sounds like we need to go for 9 days. Though.
Yes, you should come for a long course, and then you get to play with all the stuff. And but anyway, the shop's got a lot of unique stuff, which is difficult to find generally, or what you have to go to, say, a paramedic supply place or something, which often general members of the public might be uncomfortable with that, or they don't know even where to start, or you're dealing with a place that's not really set up for retail and so on, whereas we're set up for retail. And you can speak to people who have actual experience of the stuff rather than people who are, and we're not tied to any products, which is something that I've always been quite cautious about. So if we advise you something on a product, we don't get sponsored by them, we don't get the stuff for free from them. It's because we've used it, we know what it does, we know how to compare it to another product, and we might keep 3 or 4 of the same product, and I can tell you pros and cons of every single one. It's not because Johnny at that importing company sponsors me one, so I'm promoting this or whatever. We can tell you actual truth about everything. There's no connection. So that's what we try to set up with the shop.
Have you got it online as well, or is it just purely a physical shop?
At the moment, it's mainly physical. We were online. My online shop's just off at the moment because of we were moving a gun shop and so on is quite a mission and permissions and all of that stuff. Okay. So it was delayed. So that will be back on soon again. CHS's shop is up, and so that's chsguns.co.za. So they have obviously the general firearms and accessory stuff, but also some of the medical products is on their website at the moment. Cool. And ours will be back up shortly again. So
awesome.
Coming back to the build a bag idea, Brett said he bought this from Take Lot and he has a price. Looking at this bag, I mean, it's not the nicest. It's kind of like made from the similar material to what the inside, like you make these recycled or reusable pick and pay bags that you buy. If a person wanted something similar to this, maybe also red, what type of price range would you look at your empty bag being? Because I mean, even if I bought this thing, well, how much did you say you paid for it?
I paid $850.
Okay, so if I bought this for $850 and I went through it carefully, I might lob a few things out of here. So I'm literally going for the bag. So if I'm going to start with your bag, what am I going to start with?
Okay, so we've at the moment we have bags from other brands as well that we have Condor, Nelly, Contex, and 511, and a few other things. And then in the Wild Medix branded bags, we have 2 sizes at the moment. They're predominantly meant for outdoor pursuits, right? For expeditionary use and hiking and so forth.
Like a car bag.
Well, so it's interesting. The one is a smaller hiking bag, which is, I think the empty bag is somewhere between $350 and $400. So I don't normally work in the shop, so it's just. So it's not super expensive. It's about, I think, as I said, about $350 to $400 for the smaller one. It's basically the size of a larger hiking wet bag. The bathroom kit bag. It's like kind of that size bag. It's got 3 compartments, rolls open a little bit like a rolly kit, and you can, good for hiking trips, I guess your basic hiking bag. And then we've got one that's our own design, which is our first responder bag, which actually is really nice. It's a kind of a squarish bag when it's fully packed. It is designed to fit inside a 50-liter dry bag. So you can buy a separate dry bag from any of the C2 Summit or whatever, and you put that bag will fit in there. So you can have a totally waterproof kit. Doesn't have a lot of nonsense on the outside. So not a lot of outdoor bags where guys put paracord and elastics and all kinds of nonsense on the outside to make it look cool in the shop. This bag doesn't have that, so that it can slip in and out of a backpack very easily and so on. And it's designed to page. So as you work from the side where the logo is, you've got your compartment. So you start with your bleeding control, you have your assessment tools, and you go through the sections, as you would treat your patient. So the bag is designed to be a reminder of my patient treatment algorithm, essentially, and you work according to that. And then, of course, you can stock it according to your activity and your risk profile, of where it is that you're going. So that bag, it took quite a lot of thought over the years. Every batch, we make little changes to them. So we get them normally 100 at a time or whatever. And they're quite cool. They're very popular. Depending on what you put in there, you can obviously go quite high on the price, but the empty bag at the moment I think is $650, so it's not
that's not bad.
It's not super expensive. Look, we've always had this thing with that sort of stuff, ideas to get it into the hands of people, especially with equipment. We're not predominantly dependent on equipment supply, so I'm not trying to that's not what we do. We're a training supplier. That's our primary function. And so equipment secondary to that. So, I don't have to completely milk the cow and everything. It's the idea is to get the decent first aid kit in people's hands that will last for many years. So the first aid kit that we've got at the moment, the Wild Medix one, is made by, the smaller one is made by Northridge, which is a local supplier. Brett would know them from backpacks and so on. It's a, high quality, heavy duty. It's kind of old school. It's cool.
Old school Cordura.
It works at last. And then our big bag, the one we designed ourselves, is made by Red Mountain, which is the old Carrymore people who used to be Carrymore, right? So you can kick a thing around. It will repair it if need be. You can, it's cool. It lasts. It's not flashy. It does the job, and it'll do the job for decades. And that's what we try to aim for. Now that bag, you could turn it into a car kit. You could turn it into some sort of a survival kit if you want. You can turn it into a hiking kit. So it was designed to fit into expedition size backpack. So you can put it in the dry bag and then in the backpack, or just in the backpack, and you can carry supplies in that for an expedition for about 15 to 20 people. And so just change the content. So you can use the same bag, or you can buy 3 or 4 of the same bag. So they're now in different colors, so you can buy a different colored one for each application. So you can have
It's nice to have access to bags that are less Chinese tactical, and more useful.
Absolutely.
Because having stuff that you can kick around, not that you want to kick your first aid kit around, but something that will survive being in your bag, being in your car, just being in the Karoo with thorns and stuff like that.
I think also with the bags and especially with the more tactical bags, before you buy the bag, think about what you want inside, and also understand that the stuff that's inside is actually more important. So I always say to guys, if I'm going to buy, I can afford, say I have 2,000 Rand to spend, and rather buy 2 tourniquets and carry them in your trouser pocket than buy 1 tourniquet and a flashy tactical pouch for it. You know what I mean? The pouch, put the stuff in a shopping sackie, but have the right stuff first, But then also you can, once you have if you have the stuff, what sort of bag I need to look for. So as an example, we had a couple of years back, we had a big security company. They wanted IFACs, but the owner of the company insisted on a specific brand of pouch. And he wanted this very tactical brand. I won't mention it, but very cool brand, or marketing terms considered very cool brand. Anyway, so we get these pouches in, and you find out that you cannot actually get a commonly available tourniquet inside one of these things. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't close. But it's supposed to fit the tourniquet. It's made for that. It's marketed for that, and it's so things like that. It's just, don't trust that the pouch and the stuff fits. So get the stuff, make sure it fits before you buy it. You're dropping a lot of money on that stuff. And as I said, don't go and buy 3,000 rand bag if you can't afford the equipment. Get the decent equipment first and then worry about buying the bag, or buying a flashy bag if you really want one. If you go look, if money is no issue, then buy whatever value you want, right? But be as flashy as you can.
Well, one thing I want to ask, like talking about bags. I know I bought a bag from an online retailer a while ago, and it's it's got you can fit Molly, fit on your tactical bag and all that type of stuff. But one of the things it has is a place where you can put your blood type on the outside. Useful is that on your own personal kit, having your blood type somewhere on it.
It's decorative mostly. It's look, if you were going to receive blood, they would always check that stuff first. They're not going to go and see, what is stuck on the guy's first aid kit, or it may be useful in some sort of a team setting or whatever. But I think for the average civilian, it's essentially a decorative thing that you put on a pouch. If you want it on there, cool, put it on. But it's, I would say in hospital context, whatever, it's not going to be trusted as they're going to check before they give you blood.
So mostly you won't be receiving blood in the field anyway.
And it's highly unlikely. As I said, look, in some contexts that might happen. So if you look in the context of a very advanced military setup or something like the US military or whatever, you may have something where you have receiving blood in the field. But I cannot see in South Africa or anywhere for Africa, for instance, that you're going to easily be receiving blood in the field. I mean, I might be wrong. There may be places, but as I said, for average civilian in the street in South Africa, it's a decorative thing. You may as well have a ex-corp hot patch or something on your bag. It's sort of, it has no real, but it's cool if you want to have it,
even if you go into a long expedition into Africa and whatever else, do the guys have the same facilities to test your blood?
Yeah, it's got, as I said, it's got very limited use. Look, if they can give blood, they'll be able to check it, right?
Yes.
And to test.
Okay, cool.
It's not. I would be more concerned about whether they can actually give me blood if I need it. But if you look at, if you speak to the blood bank and so on, and what are they called, the South African blood services and so on, we recently had a lady do a talk there before one of our courses. It was quite interesting. She came before the Stop the Bleed course, and she did a Please Give Blood course. But anyway, so she said it's interesting if you look at the statistics of it, where most blood donations don't actually end up in trauma. People think it ends up in trauma. It actually ends up in maternity and then elective or planned operations and so forth. A very small percentage of it actually ends up in trauma. Look, there's nothing wrong with having one of those patches. Sorry to get back to your question. It's just that it's not what what people, as useful as people think it is. It's not something that makes a huge difference. But if it motivates you and it keeps you interested in your toys, then keep it. It's always good.
It's trying to wade through myth versus practical experience. I found that a lot of people don't even know their own blood type.
Exactly.
And then there's other myths around what blood type actually means,
yes,
which is a completely different conversation.
Yes,
podcast.
Exactly. That stuff, as I said, mainly decorative. No super use, Stuart. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks. So, circling back to first aid, I know we've been talking about it the whole time, but you actually give courses. You through the Wild Medix, you teach people those skills. Can you give us a breakdown of what courses you give, and for the person starting off, what is the kind of the basics that every person should have?
Yes.
I have my opinion, Brett has his, but in your opinion, what is the basic everybody should have, and then what should their next step be?
Okay, so obviously, I think maybe if we look at what is available all over the country, not just from me, I can tell you what we do obviously as well, because there are lots of providers offering good courses in different fields and so on. I think what people are familiar with in South Africa is what is called a level 1, level 2, and level 3 first aid course. Now, interesting of those things, they don't really exist as level 1, 2, and 3 anymore. That was the old Department of Labor courses that was named like that. There are now courses that is formulated under the QCTO, which is part of a SAQA and the National Qualifications Framework. Those are workplace first aid courses, right? So it works essentially the same way, where there's a basic first aid course, a level 1, an intermediate, a level 2, and an advanced, which is a level 3. I think what people need to understand about those courses is that they are workplace courses. So they're designed around legalities for being a workplace first aider and working in a workplace environment. So in a shop, in a factory, or whatever. And help is
Not too far.
Not too far. Yeah, let's put it that way. Help is not too far. So
when I did every 2 years we got to renew our first aid for work. I did more OHS than we did first aid.
Yes.
And to me, that was just absolutely boring.
Yes. Well, it's the problem with it is a lot of those courses, the providers often spend more time telling you scary stories about what not to do because you're going to get sued and blah, 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 blah. Although nobody's ever been sued in South Africa for that in a layperson capacity that I'm aware of. I'm not talking about paramedics or whatever, or doctors getting into trouble. That's a different thing because we say registered professionals, right? But first aiders don't generally get in trouble in South Africa if they act like a reasonable person would. In other words, stick to your training, do what you're supposed to do. Don't try and do things that you learned on YouTube or on Facebook or something like that. But anyway, so those courses, there's nothing wrong with the skills component of the course. As you said, the problem is if you're not interested in the workplace legalities and so on, you're spending half a morning learning stuff that you don't want to learn. In terms of the skills of, say, a level 1 course, those are very good skills to have. CPR, burns, dealing with, diabetic emergencies, dealing with epilepsy, whatever. So it's included in the syllabi. Very, very, very good skills to have. I think if you're going to start somewhere, let's say you don't require a government certificate. Okay, you're learning this stuff because you want the hard skills. You're not that interested, or you're not a workplace first aider. Keep in mind that nothing says you cannot attend a course which isn't a South African government stamped course. Okay, there are loads of courses which are not. If you're going to pick one thing, I would say start with Stop the Bleed. Do you stop the bleed? Massive trauma, bleeding control. It's most likely that's what will save a life. Okay. And then if you can combine that with what is normally in a basic first aid course, that's a good place to start. All right. So CPR course, or you could go do a Stop the Bleed. Then you can pick a CPR workshop, something like that. And you can mix and match the skills that you want to do. You don't have to go do a full level 1 or 2 or 3 course. I think in terms of a person who doesn't require a legal certificate, pick the things that you want to learn, and there are so many available from different providers. Okay. When it comes to us, our popular courses is Stop the Bleed, of course, as I mentioned before, it's quite popular. Then we have different categories. So we have urban courses, so we also offer those workplace courses. So if you need the certificate, we do the traditional style level 1, 2, 3, or whatever they call them now, under the basic, intermediate, and advanced first aider under the QCTO. So we do those courses. And then we run our specialities, essentially the longer courses. So most popular one we do is the wilderness first responder. Now, there also people need to understand that there's a difference between a course that claims to be a wilderness course and an actual wilderness course, and then also wilderness first responder is quite a specific thing. So internationally, if you look at, say, in the US, you look in Europe and in the UK and whatnot, a wilderness first responder is specifically an advanced first aid course aimed at people who either work professionally in the wilderness or spend a lot of time in the wilderness. So guides and so forth, of course, is a primary market. We get a lot of recreational market people, and then we spend a lot of time training in the mining sector for exploration, right? So geologists and so on who work in the field, and that's a lot of the work I do for training at the moment is in the mining sector. So it's not developed mines, it's in the exploration side, because there the guys are often very much alone. Depends on the company they work for. They may have a site paramedic or something, but in some cases they don't have a paramedic at the exploration unit. And even if you do have a paramedic, if a paramedic's sitting in a camp and you're 6 hours away from him or 5 hours away from him, of which 2 hours is on foot, it's a different story. And often the site paramedics, it's one guy, on his own. He needs the people to be trained to help him. It's, the paramedic on his own can't do all the stuff. You need other people to be trained. So wilderness first responder, typically it's an 80 to 90 hour course. It's advanced. You will learn some stuff which the regulation courses will kind of frown upon, because it's, it's not, it's not about being scared. It's about doing stuff. You have to learn to do the stuff because you're on your own.
You don't have a hospital backing you up.
Yeah, you're it. And you look, even in the urban environment, in a critical emergency, you're it. And people need to start realizing that. But that's the myth with tourniquets originally. Don't use a tourniquet because the guy's arm will fall off afterwards. It's complete nonsense, and that is commonly taught on first aid courses. So wilderness first responder, that's one of our primary things that we offer. Then we also offer courses for medical professionals. So we run expedition medic courses, we run specific activity medic courses. So we do mountain medicine, we do dive medicine, we have canyoneering medicine, we've got a whitewater medicine course, and so forth. So but it's more aimed at medical professionals. So, and there we run the fellowship program for the Wilderness Medical Society in the US. So that's like a 5-year fellowship where you can gain credits and so forth.
Wow.
So
so that's the hardcore stuff.
Yeah, so a few of our instructors are fellows of it. So of course we've got a Professor Walther Meyer who's in charge of kind of our medical syllabus and overseeing what the rest of us nutcases do. And then so we have our walking encyclopedia who does that, and then but a lot of our medics are at that, and we've been running that program for a while. A lot of doctors have been through it, especially doctors. We've had some medics through it, some nurses and so on. But for that you need a medical qualification. So you can, but not a high level necessarily. You can be if you're a BAA or you're a basic ambulance assistant, or if you're a physiotherapist or something, you can get onto the fellowship program and do the wilderness medicine fellowship.
And what advantage would there be for a doctor? Now he's a doctor, he's qualified, everything, he knows everything. But what would it benefit him to do that wilderness?
Yeah, so interesting. The way you phrase that question is he now knows everything. Okay.
Well, that's how a layperson thinks about it.
So the average medical program does not include things like wilderness medicine, expedition medicine, and so on. It's a different skill set, and also it's a different environment to practice it in.
Yes.
You learn a lot of things. We get a lot of doctors actually on our standard wilderness first responder course. We get doctors who even come in from overseas to do that course because they learn stuff that they never did in normal med school. And the same would apply to sort of paramedics who's gone through paramedic college or through university and so on. There's this myth that, all paramedics are wilderness capable, all paramedics are tactical capable. It's complete nonsense. They're trained for the urban environment predominantly. They may do a small unit on, say, mountain rescue or surf rescue or something like that. But unless the guy actually specializes in it, it's not, 4 days out of a 4-year course talking about mountain rescue doesn't make you a mountaineer. And looking after yourself on top of looking after other people's a different story. So a lot of those courses combine skills, not just medicine skills, but also personal mountain survival skills or whatever the activity might be, whitewater survival skills and so forth on top of it. So that let's say a doctor wants to work as an expedition medic, then he's not a hindrance to the other people. Because the guy may be the best doctor on earth, but he's never climbed up a mountain, and then he becomes a hindrance, and the clients have to start guiding him up the mountain, or the guide has to spend half his time dragging the doctor up the hill. So it becomes that's kind of how it's to expose people to the environment and to practice that medicine with limited equipment in that sort of austere environment where you don't have everything. You can't just hold out your hand and say nurse this, and there's no nurse. It's you.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things. And then we also do run tactical medicine courses. I think there's also a misunderstanding a lot in the market about that. A tactical medicine course is medicine in a care under fire environment or in a austere environment where there's a threat, either an immediate threat or a possible threat. And it's a medicine course predominantly. So people think, I must do half an hour of tourniquet training and then run around the shooting range for 3 days and I'm now a tactical medic. That's complete nonsense. Our courses, we aim at either civilians who want to be capable in that type of situation. So it's the prepared citizen who maybe has a firearm license, who may have to deal with something like a home invasion, or it is guys who work in a setting where it's not big teams. So it's it's a security officer, it's a police officer, it's a detective, it's whatever. So we've had quite a lot of people in those categories through on those courses. And those courses also run from just the medical component, which is kind of 3-day course, up to also a 9-day program, which includes a tactical component. with that. So that includes then the shooting and hand-to-hand combat and so forth as part of that training. We have a faculty of instructors who work on those courses. It's not one guy who tries to teach everything, who tries to be a specialist in everything. Yeah. We work with different instructors. So even on the medical side, we have different people sometimes for different things, because some guys are better at certain things or more experienced at certain things than others are. So we have a faculty of instructors who run those courses. They're not meant to be Instagram cool courses. They're meant to teach you actual skills that you can apply in a real situation. With us, I'm really inactive on things like Instagram and Facebook and so forth. I'm not the guy who's going to be there taking selfies with or telling people, oh, I stopped the bleed this morning. That's not what it's about. It's about getting people the skills, and it's about the students, not about the instructors. And that's kind of the courses that we do. As I said, our speciality specifically is tough environments, remote environments, and places where you're properly alone. If you think about, say, a military medic who's got the whole US Army backing him up, compared to a mountain guide in the back of a Maluti's dealing with a problem, who's really alone, if you think about it. So there's no backup for that guy in the Maluti's, whatsoever. There's not going to be a helicopter that flies in, or a big plane that's outfitted like a hospital, So it's for that guy. That's really what we're aiming at. We also have some newer courses coming out now, which, one might be of interest to you guys as well, is where it's more modular. So it's designed to bolt onto the wilderness first responder course. So it's things like reach and treat, how to abseil into a patient, for instance, how to secure yourself in the patient and treat the patient there, and then get yourself back out. And then you get your second level where you start taking the patient out. And then also medical components. So we do a suturing and IV course, but you have to have a wilderness first responder first, so that you have a foundation when you start doing these things. And then there's a bushcraft style course where you make the equipment, you make shelters, and you start looking at overnighting with your patient. And then we're starting to develop a survival medicine course, which is really your SHDF, whatever, grid's gone down, system's gone down course. That's quite exciting. So I quite like that. So
that sounds really cool.
A lot of new stuff coming in the next 12 months.
A lot of those things sound like you need a certain level of fitness and and from work.
So some of them you would need a bit of that, but actually not so much, because remember, you can't run a training course like that like a OPI. You've got to, because the guys have to focus on the learning. It's the same, Brett will know from the mountain leadership courses and those things. Some guys had this belief that on my mountain leadership course, I must walk the living hell out of you to show you how tough I am, and I'm going to walk you 50 k's a day. And
you mean carry me 30
k's? Well, the thing about it is you learn very little. You learn hiking socks, right? But it's not, you can't do that on a course where you're teaching skills to people. So that shouldn't be too much of a concern for people. Sure, you need to be prepared. It might get cold, it might get dark. We do very, very active simulations, and our simulations are very real. It's one of the things that we really focus on. And I see there are a lot of other guys now doing that as well. They so I'm glad I motivated them to start doing that. Instead of saying, imagine a fracture, it actually looks like a fracture and you're dealing with it. And we do night courses and all kinds of things, which makes it very real for people. So we try because it's really what you need to experience, to be able to function under stress.
So I think coming back to the idea of, like if there's a GP out there listening to this and he's getting a little bored with the same, would you recommend doing something like a wilderness or a course, just even if he's not going or she's not going to be changing their just as another skill set?
Yes, absolutely. Look, so our courses for professionals have also got CPD accreditation, so that's kind of your continuing professional development points that the doctors and the professional medics have to earn. So it's a cool way of going on a course and getting your points, instead of doing the same CPR course every year or the same cardiac course every year or something like that. Go do something a bit different. Also, the medicine is up to date there. It's really real, and we've got some excellent doctors who run that course. So I just go on those courses to tell jokes and stuff, but the doctors and then to provide the medic component, because a lot of doctors like to experience the out of hospital component of it. It's very different if you're suddenly if you're treating a fracture and you just had to cross a river to get to some guy who's stuck on a rock somewhere, and now he needs his femur sorted out or traction. It's very different to tractioning a femur on a nice hospital bed somewhere,
Yes.
So yeah, the guys like it. A lot of the young doctors come, and we've got a whole following of doctors who come regularly on the courses. They're fantastic. It's nice to see that as well, that they take interest in these things. For younger doctors especially, it's a different field as well. Plus it opens up the world for them to go and whatever, work on a cruise ship, work on expedition, see, I don't know, join my army, see the world, but you can join the medical course, see the world. Yeah.
And for those of us that would like to convince our bosses to send us on a course like this, are you guys VAT registered,
Yes.
or can we?
Yes.
Claim, I don't know, like skills
so
development thing.
Exactly. So our like the wilderness first responder course, most of our longer courses, you still get the government compliance certificate with the course.
Yes.
Because we're covering way more than what is needed on those courses. So we cover that as well. So if you come on a wilderness first responder course, you don't need to still go and do a level 3 somewhere else or whatever. You get that certificate with it.
Do I need a level 1 though?
No, not to come onto the course. No, you
Okay.
can start from zero. It's a intensive course, so it builds up. And you will get your advanced first aid certificate with it, so you'll be compliant. So if your boss sends you on the course, you can be a workplace first aider after that. We are VAT registered. You can claim that back. If the NQF component, that stuff of it, you can claim from a skills development fund if your company is at that level where we're making SDF claims and so on. You can. So yes, there are ways and means to get onto the courses. And we also a lot of people book in advance, and then you can pay it over a period of time. You don't have to necessarily pay it in a lump sum. So if you book 4 or 5 months in advance, you can pay every month a little bit until the course starts or whatever. You don't, we can pay with a credit card, whatever. I think in terms of what you get, we try and not outprice our public courses like that, our open enrollment courses. Where if you look at a wilderness first responder, if you went to do one in the US, you can pay up to $3,000 for wilderness first responder course. And that's why we get guys who fly in here to come and do it here, because they can come fly here, have a holiday, do the course, and fly back, and and then have a certificate. So it's we try that. It's a service as much as it is a business. It's to try and get the skills out there to people.
And where do we find you if we're looking for those courses and to choose those courses? You said your website is offline.
The shop is offline. The training website's online.
Oh, is it?
It's a little old, but it's Wild Medix. So it's WILDMEDIX.com. So it's not a .co.za, it's .com. So wildmedix.com. And then we do have Instagram. I think it's Wild Medix ZA. You can find us there. There's Facebook Wild Medix page. You search Wild Medix, you'll find it. And you can contact us off the webpage. Of course, there's cell phone numbers. You can WhatsApp us, whatever you like to do.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we'll be putting all of that in the show notes as well, of course. Walter, I think we're going to wrap up for now. It's been absolutely awesome. We've been going for about an hour and a half now. So there's a glass of wine with my name on it outside. Thank you very much for coming through. We really appreciate that you made the trip up here, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, guys, and good luck with what you're doing. I think it's really needed and an awesome idea to have a South African podcast like what you're doing. It's awesome, man. And thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Cheers. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Off-Grid Survival. For more info and updates, feel free to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Off-Grid Survival ZA. That's it for now. We will see you next time. And always remember, be prepared.